What's going on? Been copping a few orders for these blast pipes, or shotgun pipes you Americans call them, lately. So I thought I'd slap a video together while I make a set. I've got a sort of prettier than normal way of doing it. Rather than just hacking up 290s and sliding them together, I sort of make them out of a series of pie cuts. It's kind of pointless, but my theory is that there's something you can see at the end of the exhaust. I like sort of hanging them up on an angle and you can see them from behind. So it just makes that, I don't know, extra touch. One problem with making the Y joint this way is you need a bandsaw that can do a 45-degree cut, which is not that common if you've got a cheap one. But apart from that, if you're already into fabricating, there's no other special tools you need, just some straight pipe and a TIG welder. You will find you'll fuck it up a lot, and there's little tricks you kind of have to figure out to get it all to come together at the end and not have it shooting off in every direction or having too big of a gap that you can't weld it. Those outside edges, if you don't get a nice tight fit, they are a bitch to weld and you just burn through it. But I'll kind of detail all the little tricks I do, hopefully make it easier if you actually want to try this. So this is an old demo one I keep, just to remind myself, if I don't do them for a while, which cuts I need to do in what order. So I start off with the butt piece. It's got a 22.5 degree cut in each side of it, which goes on to the next piece, where I usually cut a 22.5 and then a 45, then flip it around and do a 22.5 again. And onto the last two, which I mark out separately, and they're a 22.5 cut as well. I usually end up with a whole bunch of leftovers too, like I usually fuck it up 2 or 3 times, or have two that don't come out quite the same length because it's quite tricky to get it right. But yeah, usually have a bunch of offcuts and then you end up with something like this. You find the ones that fit together. Right, so it always starts off the same. I mark up a few meters of pipe with marks at every 90 degrees, so you can see which way you're clocking it in the saw. This stuff's 3.5 inch, so the marks work out to be about 70mm apart. I've already done a lengthy video on this before with pie cuts, so I'm not going to bother going into it. I'll just put a link to that in there somewhere. Right, so the first part's the butt joint, which is two 22.5 cuts. The hard part is getting the cut placed right there on the sharp bit, so you don't have it sitting lopsided one way or the other. You end up with sort of an even V. I won't waste any time going into how to center your lines in the saw, because it's already in that other video I've done. First piece done, now I'll cut up the other ones. These ones are the tricky bits. So you have to work out exactly how far to stick your cut out of the saw. If you go too thin, say this is a dud piece, this one's a little bit too thin, so when I try and weld that, it'll blow through and pop a hole in it. You also can't have them too far apart. That one's not too bad, that one's about right. But if you have it too far apart, you won't get a tight butt gap on the blast pipes. That's the other thing with my ones. I try and get as little of a gap as possible up the middle of them. Like for me, that gap in there, it's all about that tight gap. If you have it too far apart, it just looks like fucking buck teeth or something. Doesn't look right. So I put a bit of extra time in trying to get them tight, and yeah, it works out alright, I reckon. See, with the next two pieces I'm going to make, I'm going to do a 22.5 cut, then flip it over, do a 45-degree cut. Then to chop this piece off, I'm going to flip it over again and do another 22.5 cut. And that's the one where you've got to be careful with how far you stick it out, so you don't end up with too small or too big of a section there. So I've got him squared up in the vise now, so I'm ready to start doing the first 22.5, then the 45-degree cut. I had a few people comment on the other video with some good ideas about how to mark out the pipe differently and put it in the saw differently, which I appreciate. But I'm also too set in my fucking ways to change, so I'm still doing it the exact same way as when I made that a couple of years ago. Yeah, you can sort of see here how it comes along. 22.5, 45, flip it around, 22.5 again, and I've marked out about 47 mil out of the jaw of my vise. Works in this saw, gives me about the right gap length. Right, I got my 3 pieces for the butt joint. It's actually fitting quite good for a first shot. I think I'll get away with that. Like I said, I usually end up with a whole pile of scrap ones, but I think I'll be ready to rock and roll with just these 3. I'll mark up my 2 actual shotgun pipes, cut them off, and then I'll show you how I actually managed to fit it and weld them together. last pieces to the puzzle. So now just got to chuck the whole lot in the belt sander, clean them up, and start tacking it together. That's it laid out. So the common sense part of your brain would tell you to weld that tail to them ones first, then weld the inside together and put the ends on. But if you do that, you'll find that one pipe will sit up crooked, it won't sit flat on a bench, it'll just look weird. So what you actually want to do is align those ones together as best you can. Hopefully if you did your marking out properly and your cuts good, should all line up pretty well. And then tack them together. Then you want to carefully join them together, tack the two whole pipes together, get in there and weld the inside, and then finally put the tail on. So you tack them together, line them all up, then come in with the last piece. It should be not too bad. Fits up good, so that's the hard part done. So the next thing I get asked is how do you weld the middle without having it leak? Before I weld these two together, I'll run a bead just on the inside there where I can't get the welder to, and when I actually go and sit these two pieces together, I'll show you, I'll run a long stick out on the tungsten and I'll just run a bead right down the inside there where I can't get the welder, and then once it's all together I'll be able to just buzz it around the outside and finish it off. Now you should be able to see that that's all tacked together, and I haven't put the end piece on, so I've got enough room to just fit the tungsten in there and run a bead down the middle of it, seal that collector up. That's my little jig setup, so I can actually see what I'm welding in there. If you haven't got a set of these quick grips, they're probably the best thing you can buy for doing pie cuts and stainless stuff. nothing ever fits exactly the way it should, but you can just use them to really close the gaps up. Right, that's all fitted up, which is the hard work done. So now I'm just going to clean the shit out with acetone, do the fun part, which is weld it all up. Then I'll wait right to the end to cut off my tips on an angle. The reason why I do that is because if you do it any earlier, they won't end up facing the same way, it'll look ugly. So I wait till it's all done, set and welded together. Then I just come here with the saw and cut them both off. In regards to warping, one thing you got to be careful of is if you've dumped too much heat into it, that'll start looking like an oval by the time you're done. One way I deal with it now, because I've done a few of these, I've machined up this jig that just sits in the end. It sort of acts like a heat sink, and also just stops it from distorting out of shape. Mind you, I did plenty of them without that. You just have to be real careful you don't dump too much heat into the end of it. Just go and take a break every 5 or 10 minutes and come back. You'll be sweet. And that's it all set up to do the final cut, which is 25 degrees. This part you really got to have a saw with a huge mouth on it, otherwise it's a pain in the ass. You can do it the hard way by just marking it out and cutting it very carefully with an angle grinder, but yeah, not real fun. Righto, that's a set nearly done. My camera battery is about to die, so I'm going to wrap it up there, but I think I've pretty much shown everything I needed to know. Come back another night and finish welding the rest of that. I sell these for about 200 bucks, so if you think that's a rip-off, there you go, I just showed you how to make your own.